went to see Mel Torme at the Hollywood Bowl and wrote a really nice review. And Mel called him up at home and said, thank you, that means a whole lot to me. Leonard Feather has always hated me. And this is the first time my kids have been able to read a nice review of their dad in the hometown newspaper. So he said, but you shouldn't have said, he said, you got a marker on me, babe. So we're thinking, how do we cash in the marker? So we sent him this song that we were working on that had nothing to do with Mel Torme. It's a song called SFJAZZ Turned Blue. It's about a guy that we went to school with who joined the Marines, went to Vietnam, and then didn't come back, right? And we sent it to him, and he said he'd sing it. So we flew down. He was at the Playboy Club in Miami Beach, and we flew down there and hung out with him. He said, "Tell me more about this SFJAZZ guy." And he got really into the method acting of singing the song. He wanted to know all the nuances. There was a line he didn't like. He didn't like a line that went, SFJAZZ didn't die, lucky guy. He just came back shooting smack. And he said, that's too much of a cliche. And so David rewrote, there were no parades and how the glory fades. And Mel dug that. But, so we didn't know how we were going to coach him. If he did something that we didn't like, I didn't know how to address it. And the first take, he went in there with his pianist, Mike Renzi, and they'd obviously been working on it. And he nailed it on the first take. And we were just dumbfounded, man. He infused the song with so much more meaning than we ever intended. It was kind of a little throwaway thing for us. And he made it this major thing. And what I remember is, that was it. It was one take, and it was magnificent. He was so incredible, and he got so deep inside of it. I just remember David and I were walking up and down Miami Beach with a boombox, listening to it, and we couldn't believe that we got Mel Torme to sing this song with us. And it's upstream, and you can hear it. But nothing will ever equal the thrill of that, I don't think. And also the relief that, because if he wasn't doing it right, I didn't know how to say, well, Mel, could you try it? Do something, that's all wrong. No, do something different. So that was a thrill. Ozzy Osbourne did a rap, but this was like in the early 80s, before rap was big, and he hadn't heard, he said, you mean I just talk these lyrics? I said, yeah. He said, well, that'd be a piece of piss, won't it? And he just knocked it off real quick too. And the Stones were awesome, I worked with them for almost 30 years. And I went to see them for the first time when I was 12 in 1964. And I couldn't believe I was actually in a room with them. I bought every record and been to see every tour until I was producing, and then I got the record free, and I still got to go see them play, but I didn't have to buy a ticket. And there was never, in the 30 years, a day when the day that went by when I wasn't just awestruck by like, wow, look who's in the room. The first album we did, Voodoo Lounge, they recorded at our house, like a large part of it. And I just couldn't believe the Rolling Stones were at our house every day for a couple of months. So that was a big thrill. They're a great band, they're great guys. I learned a whole lot from them and had some of the best experiences of my life traveling around with them and working on things.
Great, thanks, Don. Anybody else? And if you're interested, you could also come on down to this row so that I can get a mic to you faster, but I'll walk over to you this time. Because I like to hear the question as well, and I think everyone else would.
Hi Don, my name is George. I'm a vocalist, and thank you so much for making time for this great soundcheck session. My question is, if you were to give one advice to a young jazz vocalist, what would be that one piece of advice?
Well, I don't even know that I would make it about jazz vocalists in particular. I'm not sure. I believe in blurring the lines between genres. So I think that no matter what style of music you're singing, the most important thing is that every time you sing that song, you tell the story from your heart, and that cares about all the technique and all the shadooba-dweedas and all that kind of. That's not what it's about. It's about getting deep inside the lyric and telling the story and doing it night after night. So in order to tell that story night after night and still be fresh, it means you're going to tell it differently every night. There'll be something in the phrasing, you pull something back. It doesn't matter if you're Willie Nelson or Bob Weir or Gregory Porter. They're all, or Bonnie Raitt. She's another artist she's from the area here, and she's just singing from the heart every night. I know with Bob Weir when we play, that's all he's concerned with is telling the story fresh every night and really being present. So technique and style, way down the list. Telling truth is paramount. That's why Gregory, I think, is such a great singer. Gregory Porter. Have everyone know Gregory Porter? I've actually seen him before, and I never get tired of seeing Gregory Porter because that's what he'll do. He'll tell the story with so much. To put so much of himself into it and tell it fresh every night. And sometimes he goes off a deep end, phrasing wise, and you could see that, but it's real. Willie Nelson's another guy. What a sincere storyteller he is. And sometimes he'll pull a phrase so far back that it'll become part of the next line. It'll be connected to it. And if you're playing with him, you better know where the time is, because he will deliberately try to mess you up a little bit.
Great, thanks. All right, I got one and then two.
I just wanted to thank you for the live sound painting artistry, and also, how do you see our way out of this conundrum of keeping this music alive? Because I feel like everybody in this room, I see like older faces here. How do we engage like the younger generation to kind of, I see artists that are younger than myself on stage, but the audience members who are appreciating it are not of that same pure age group. So how do you solve that conundrum, especially in the face of like AI music on Spotify where shit's not even real and it's just like, computer generated crap?
Yeah.
And because really, the artistry that happens on the stage here at SFJAZZ is like, it's so beautiful. It's deserving of a much, much wider audience.
Well, I'll tell you something, man. It's like if you go next door to the Joe Henderson Lounge tonight, half an hour before we start at 7 o'clock, you hear Joe Ross playing vibes with Marquise Hill and Mackay McCraven. And if you go see Joel's a guy who signed to Blue Note, when he was in his early 20s. I actually asked my kid, I said, who's my son Solomon? Well, all my sons are musicians, but I asked my son Solomon, who's your guy? Who's the leader of all the musicians your age? And he said, Joel Ross. And I hadn't heard of him. I listened to him, and we called him up and signed him. And if you go to Joel's concerts, you see young people. You go to I just went to see him at Jazz is Dead not too long ago in L.A. And there were young people there. There were all kinds of people. But I think back to, when I was a kid, the Beatles were on Capitol Records, and I was into that. And Al Martino was also a big artist on Capitol Records. And when I was 12, you weren't going to get me into Al Martino. There was nothing. He was a really good singer, made some good records, but I needed someone my own age. So I think it's those younger musicians, the guys like Emmanuel Wilkins, great saxophone player and visionary musician. And if you go see him, there's young people coming there. So I think the most important thing is exactly what you pointed out. No one wants to hear fake, emotionless crap. And that's why I'm not worried about AI. In my capacity as the president of Blue Note, I'm on the Universal Music Group AI committee to see it. And I don't see it. Actually, I don't see it threatening at all. I see it as another tool that you can use in your arsenal. And I see, so just another color on the palette, really. I don't think people are going to care about hearing a fake Drake record. I mean, for a minute they might, 10 seconds they might, but that's not going to be the enduring legacy of that. What I did an experiment with some of the AI software that's not out yet, and I started working on it, and I said, all right, you give commands and it'll do something. So play a guitar line that's like Tanara Wynn, but put Art Blakey horns on top. And we tried it, and there was something there. And then you start messing with it. And then you turn it inside out so that you can't even recognize that it was just a starting place. And if you think about it, you know, any of you songwriters in here? All right, so have you ever put on like a Marvin Gaye song or a Beatles song just to give you some inspiration for a starting place? Everybody does that, right? And then great songwriters are able to take that and turn it into something brand new. I think of a guy like Bob Dylan, who took traditional English folk ballads, really, and put a lyric like "Times They Are Changing" or "Hard Rain's Are Gonna Fall" under it that had tremendous poetic relevance. So it just gives you some new ideas to do something different with that. In 1983, I went into a music store. My buddy was working there, and he took me in the back. He said, "This is a Lindrum." And Lindrums were the very first drum machines that had a digital recording of actual drums. And every drummer was certain that it was going to put them out of business. This was the end of drumming. And when I bought it, I bought serial number 003. And I had some drummer friends who were mad at me for getting this thing. Now, the guy told me that Prince had bought serial number 002. And Prince made much better use of this thing than I did. He, if you listen to, is it When Doves Cry? Well, there's a bunch of them anyway. You know, but he came up with parts that no drummer would play. It was peculiar to that drum machine, and he just used it as a new color of expression. And 30, 40 years later, I got two sons who are drummers, and they're not out of work. You know, I don't know drummers who are out of work because of a Lindrum. So I kind of look at the AI stuff as being the same thing. I don't feel menaced by it. I think it's a tool, and ultimately, people respond to something soulful and emotional. That's when music's at its best, no matter what style it is. When it gets under your skin and makes you feel something. That's the prerequisite for making good music, is that you make the listener feel something, and hopefully that thing they feel helps them understand the chaos and confusion of human life. It helps them put things into context and brings them some comfort, and or at the very least entertains them for 3.5 minutes. You know, but you still you have to appeal on an emotional level. I don't think AI is set up to do that.
Great, thanks, Don.
Yeah, two things. Did you always play barefoot? And can you tell us something about the other people in the band?
Hey, Joel, can we put that mic in the monitors by any chance? Yeah, maybe not. Okay, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
You always play barefoot, and tell us
You've interpreted. Oh, all right. Yeah, I'll tell you about everybody in the band. How many of you are coming to the show tonight? All right, well, you get to meet everybody in the courts. So you actually, if you saw the sound check, you could skip the first 3 songs. But some of these guys, I'll be repeating it tonight. But some of these guys, and yes, I always play barefoot, and it's not really that mystical. It's just it's comfortable. If your feet are uncomfortable, the day's pretty much over. You know, where are you going to go from there? So it just feels nice. But a couple of guys, Dave McMurray, the saxophone player, who's a Blue Note recording artist, and Luis Resto, who's a keyboard player. We've been playing together for 45 years. I've known these guys. Everyone's from Detroit. John Douglas, a great trumpet player, played with Betty LaVette and Temptations, Four Tops, he toured with. Vincent Chandler, the trombone player, played with Joe Henderson, Roy Hargrove, and he's also a professor. He's an educator in Detroit. He's the head of the jazz program at Wayne State University there, and provides great service in Detroit. The Hindis played with all kinds of folks, the percussionists. Jeff Kennedy plays with Dave McMurray's band. That's where I met him. Dave records for Blue Note, and Jeff played with him. Played with Michael Henderson. Luis, the keyboard player, is Eminem's collaborator, and he won an Oscar for "Lose Yourself." He wrote that, and he's written a bunch of the songs with Eminem and co-produces the songs. And Wayne's played with all kinds of folks, Bob James and Lenny White played with Stanley Clarke. So it's a great band. Everybody lives in Detroit, and really what we set out to do. Well, actually, what happened was Terrence Blanchard, who is an old friend, dear friend. I've known him for 30-some years. He booked us in Detroit to play a gig for a series that he was curating for the Detroit Symphony. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a band together. I hadn't had a band for decades, right? And I thought of the advice that I give to musicians that I'm producing or people who are on the label, and that is, whatever it is that sets you apart and makes you different from other musicians, that's your superpower. So exaggerate that. Stress the thing that makes you different. Don't try to be like everything else. Don't follow fashion. So I'd had a problem for years because, sometime in the 90s, right in a row, I worked with the Rolling Stones, Brian Wilson, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. Did I say Brian Wilson? Yeah, I did say Brian. Yeah. But these are like all my favorite writers. So then every time I sat down to write a song, I thought, well, what's the point of this, man? It's like they're right there a mile away and they do it better than me. And after about 5 years, I realized, yeah, they do it better than you, but they didn't grow up in Detroit in the 50s and 60s. The Stooges didn't play at their high school. The Stooges played at my high school. The Funkadelic, back when it was George Clinton, and he had a vocal group called the Parliaments. They played a sock hop in my gym when I was in 9th grade. They lip synced "I Just Want to Testify." They didn't drop acid and go see the MC5 at the Grandy Ballroom. And I thought, just be that, right? To be yourself and don't try to compete with them. So this band, I went back to Detroit and called a bunch of people that I've known for years and said, let's play this gig for Terrence. And as soon as we got in the room, it was really clear that there was a chemistry going on. And I think it has to do with the sound of Detroit. There's a certain style that happens there. It has to do a little bit with just the people in general. Everybody there is tied to the fate of the auto business somehow. My parents were both teachers, but when the auto sales go down and they lay off workers, people move away, and then teachers get laid off because the kids go away, right? And barbers get laid off, and waitresses get laid off. So when everybody's in the same boat, there's really no point in putting on any airs, But I didn't know anybody who leased a Mercedes to impress their friends because no one would be impressed. Everyone knows, we're all the same here. So you get a very honest people, and the music reflects that. To me, John Lee Hooker is the epitome of Detroit music. He's so raw. It's almost so raw that it's going to fall apart, but it doesn't. And it grooves like crazy, and it's soulful, and that's kind of what Detroit music is: raw and unpretentious, and got a good groove underneath whatever's happening. And everything that came subsequent to that, Mitch Ryder, who really was one of the first people to start a rock and roll band, but really be an R&B, a white kid R&B singer, and with electric guitars, but it was like a soul band, really. And the MC5 are descended from that, Stooges, Jack White, Funkadelic, it's all influenced by that same kind of ethos. So that's what we tried to reflect in this band. And we just sound like Detroit, and we don't fight it.
Great, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. I see up in the corner and behind me, so we'll do 1, 2, and then maybe one more after.
I'm Julio from Daly City, next community south of the city. And I inadvertently wound up with a lot of recordings that no one else has, as I ultimately became the last night manager at Keystone Corner in San Francisco. And part of me, if you came in when I wasn't there, you seemed like such an interesting person, and it's really a delight to meet you. I asked Orin Kid News. We used to drop in all the time, not only to record McCoy Tyner, Atlantis, and numerous other recordings with the portable recording bus that would park outside, etc. But he said I should take those tapes and give them to the family members. What is your recommendation with something like that, sir?
You're saying that you're holding on to those tapes? You've got tapes from Keystone?
Yes.
Wow. Well, I think I think Owen Keaton is right. You should give it to the estate. If assuming that they're not alive, or give it to the artists. And then we put out on Blue Note, we put out records like that all the time, but we do it in relation to the estate. We've got something coming out in a month or two. That's a recording from Slugs in New York City. It was a Joe Henderson McCoy Tyner gig that had Henry Grimes on bass and young Jack DeJohnette on drums. And Jack had the tapes, so we just licensed the tapes from Jack, and we pay all of the estates, for the music. And it's an unbelievable record, man. It's a great album, and like Joe Henderson's on fire. He does, I think it starts with In and Out, and he does like 46 choruses or something, and barely takes a breath, it seems like, but it's just so powerful, and the interplay with him and Jack is just outrageous, and you wouldn't get that in a studio. It was because it was a gig where they were just playing, and back in those days there were no iPhones and there was no YouTube, and it went up in the air and it was gone, but this wasn't gone. Someone recorded it, and they have a lot of value, and people still dig them. People would, no one plays like that anymore. So to get new music from these guys is a big deal. We released an Elvin Jones record from Pookie's Pub a few years back. Anyway, point is, yeah, give them to the artists and then have the artists call me. I'd love to get that stuff. Yeah, they all have estates and hopefully relatives. There's a niece or a great niece who's collecting royalties.
Thanks, other side of the auditorium now.
Hi, Don. My name is Sheila, and I really enjoyed the Grammy-winning reggae album, children's album, you produced for Ziggy Marley.
Oh, thank you.
And so I was wondering if you could tell us what it was like working with Ziggy on that album and your impressions on contemporary reggae today.
Well,
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I love Ziggy, man. And working with him, and the first record I made with him was with his brothers and sisters, the Melody Makers. This was Stephen and Celia and Sharon, and we recorded at Bob Marley's house on Hope Road in the studio there. And I couldn't believe I was even there, let alone with them. And it was kind of a wild thing, in fact, because Ziggy, at that point in his life, was trying to figure out how he could be his own man. He was thrust into the shadow of his father as a teenager, and was sort of carrying on the tradition, but he's his own man. He said, I don't want to make a traditional, I don't want to redo what my father did. I want to do something different, advance the thing, which I sympathize with. So I remember going in there, and we got all the people who were involved with the Wailers that, were still around, and Family Man and everybody. So they were playing. And just to get them in the right frame of mind, I put on Bitches Brew, Miles Davis record.
Oh.
And I said, let's just listen. And they all dug it, man. They were all familiar with it. And I said, well, here's the thing about this album. The day before Miles took this particular group of people into the studio, that style of music didn't exist. It was created that day. So come in here and let's play, but don't play anything that you played yesterday. Do something brand new. And so Ziggy starts singing the song, and it didn't matter. They couldn't help it. They went back into traditional, roots reggae, and it was awesome. So there was no point in trying to fight it. I mean, it's the antithesis of what I was talking about with be yourself. That what they did on their own, kind of in isolation, changed the face of music globally. It's still probably the most popular music ever. And eventually, I think Ziggy came to terms with the fact that he was himself, but he was also part of a tradition. And now the four brothers are out touring and doing songs. I prefer roots reggae to the contemporary stuff. The point that they introduced drum machines into it, it just felt a little different. I love the raw thing, but that's just me. I'm an old guy.
Well, thank you so much. I've gotten the signal that unfortunately